The smell of cheap booze, greasy food, and sweat filled the air. It was beautiful. My opponent stood across from me, a slimy rat of a man if there ever was one. He was no different from the usual rednecks and trailer park trash I sparred with in these bouts. He would attack with strong arms, but his footwork would be lackluster at best. He charged at me, and I tripped him with an easy sweep of the leg. I brought my foot down on the side of his knee as he recovered, and he howled in pain. Slowly, he staggered to his feet. He was limping heavily. My first blow had decided the fight. All that was left was to finish him off. He threw his hands around wildly, haymaker after haymaker. It was the panic that a feral beast feels right before it's put under. One well-timed parry, and his head was exposed. A single punch was all it took to put him back on the ground. My opponent had the sense not to get back up. A crowd of men just like him cheered. From a steel chair that served as a throne, an aged man in a purple bikini and cape came to congratulate me. He was one of those pro-wrestling types, the kind that used to be famous back when his bones could still handle a fight. This little festival was meant to be one last battle held in his honor. I was just in it for the free drinks, though. The big shot took off his cape and presented it to me as a prize. I was hesitant for a second, but within 3 seconds I had decided to embrace the spirit of things. After all, I had won the last battle. This was now a party for me as much as it was this man before me. Perhaps it was even a way of passing his talents on to the next generation. I had only a tight corset on underneath my jacket, but I figured if anyone got creepy I could just beat them down as well. I swapped my pleather for the purple cape, and took the wrestler's hand. For just a second, I felt like I was queen of the world. That's when it all came crashing down. The scum that I had fought earlier had got back up, and he was not happy. While I was distracted, he had pulled a knife and slashed it across my belly. It wasn't a deep cut, but it stung badly enough for me to cry out in shock. Within seconds, everyone else in the joint had dogpiled the guy, and were currently grinding his bones into a fine powder. The wrestler caught me, and with a low, husky voice he said, "Sorry about that, ma'am. I'm sure the boys'll treat him right. Want me to call an ambulance?" I thought about his offer, but I'm far too poor for an ambulance ride. "No, but I do appreciate the offer," I began. "It's a short ride to the nearest hospital, and this cut's pretty shallow. I'll be surprised if I even need stitches." He sighed and wished me well as I slowly walked out of the bar. The drive to the hospital was short, even with this injury. My wait was even shorter. All I had to do was show my belly to the nurse and they were ready to take me back. It was almost entertaining. I was queen of the world for exactly 1 second. The nurses insisted on carrying me off in a stretcher, and as they did, I noticed something a little funny. They all looked about the same. A triplet of young Latinas with thick but well-groomed eyebrows. I couldn't be sure because of their masks, but I could almost swear they looked a lot like me. I was carried into a small white room and placed onto a bed. 2 of the nurses fastened leather straps around me, and I began to sense that something was wrong. It was already too late to fight back, though. The nurses stripped off my clothes and wiped off the blood that had shed upon my skin. Then, one of them lit up a blowtorch. I was about to ask her what she was doing when she pointed it right into the cut on my belly. I choked on my own screams as she cauterized the wound. My eyes rolled back from the pain, and I fell unconscious. When I woke up, I was still in the same tiny white room. I had to escape. Whatever those nurses were, they didn't have my best interests in mind. If anything, they seemed more like torturers. I tried to feel around for a latch, some way that I could escape. I felt nothing, though. Not that I felt the strap and no latch, or even the softness of the bed under me. I felt nothing. My eyes strained to make out my hand. I focused my will on it, praying for my left hand to twitch softly, or even better, move. Nothing happened. I began to grow scared. I tried to move my right hand next. Nothing. I tried to wiggle my toes, but still nothing. This paralysis, it was unlike anything I had ever suffered before. There was an IV going into my arm. Was that the source of it? There really was nothing I could do. I was trapped within my own body. Hours passed, and nurses came in. I couldn't see what they did, but I measured time based on how many times they visited me. I never slept, so I could tell that they had visited me exactly 5,481 times. The room never changed. It was always a well-lit, white room with a white bed and white sheets, and the nurses all wore white coats and white turtlenecks, like the whites of my eyes turning inside out, and seeing my very soul slowly turning white like everything else. I longed for it not to abandon me. For the entirety of existence would then be white, but each second was a fresh new cut, and with every cut a little more color bled away. The nurses, they mocked me, pulled off their masks to show that they wore my face, that their souls were one with mine. Their souls were so tastelessly white, and they would soon color mine the same. They would render me one of them. One of the silent nurses with the white soul and the white coat and the white teeth that gnashed and smacked in thoughtful contemplation. I envied them. I envied their thoughts because they did not think. They merely carried out their actions. But I was cursed with the unbearable burden of thought and agency and existence when my own body was so tantalizingly out of reach. One day, something happened that was not white. A man with dark brown skin and a face that was not my own came into view. I wanted to laugh, to spit in his face and leave a mark on him, but all I could do was pant heavily upon his arrival. "Estella," he said, almost like a greeting. Wait, was that me? Am I Estella? Aw, so pretty. I flashed him a toothy grin. Or maybe a toothless grin. I couldn't remember. Oh well. "Estella, it's been 5 years since you've been detained here. Since your confinement has gone so well, I figured I'd give you a little reward. You'll be granted a slight bit of freedom and an explanation as to why you're here. Now, Estella, do you know what genocide is?" This guy was mocking me. I wanted to tell him off, to beat some answers out of him. Only this time, words came out. "What does that have to do with anything?" Oh, my God. Did I really just say that? I sound so angry. I love it. The man had something else to say. "You, Estella, have committed a series of atrocities that wiped out most of life on Earth. You are even developing time travel technology for some hideous unknown purpose. And before you ask, we're sure it's you. These clones that have kept you here are exact clones of you down to the molecule. The handful of survivors of your massacres used your machine to travel here. Something about this point in time awakened something within you. Something that made you a true abomination. At this point in time, your regime would have been the only world power. Now, we've done a pretty good job of keeping things humming along as they were. All it took was keeping you here. We can't let you out, of course. Your imprisonment here has been a great boon to society. Still, it's only human to let you know why you're here at all." With a smile, he returned to his seat. I saw a chance to break through the white walls of my mind and soul, a chance to peel my skin off and be me again. Apply pressure to the injured spot, Estella. You sure are stupid. Ever think that maybe you're being fooled? Those clones, whether they're me or not, there's no way to prove that it's me who created them. For all I know, you're just doing this to screw with my head enough that I become the monster you supposedly fear. Who do you really trust, huh? I saw his eyebrow twitch in anger. Perfect. Now, get closer. The old man pulled a tablet from his white coat and walked over to me. On it, he showed me pictures of cities being razed to the ground by armies of me. Great weapons of war crawling across blood-stained sand and flying through a crimson sky. He began to speak again. You won't be tricking me, Estella. I was there. I saw all of this with my own eyes. You've earned this punishment 1,000,000 times over, so it's best for all of us if you just take what you deserve. There's no point in further protest. I was almost there. He had grown soft and complacent. I would show him the true spirit of a fighter. You really don't have any faith, do you? All this time you've kept me here, and you still think I'm the same person who hurt you? I've never met the woman in those photos. That was a lot of pretty pictures you showed me. Reminded me of coloring books from when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Oh boy, that brings back memories. My jeering was cut off quickly by a firm hand. I couldn't believe it. He was actually choking me. This opportunity was nothing short of solid gold. I pulled the IV from my arm quickly. By the time he realized I was free, I already had a scalpel to his throat. His hands relaxed, and he began to sweat. What you're going to do, I stated calmly, is release the rest of these straps. Then you'll lead me to wherever these clones get their uniforms. Make any funny moves, and you'll be dead before you can even cry help. Understood? He nodded, too afraid to even speak. As he undid my restraints, I reflected on how truly lucky I was. He had been so lax in his approach that he didn't notice me picking his pocket or slicing the bonds on my hands. It was almost pathetic, but I wouldn't complain if it got me closer to freedom. I kept the scalpel on him as he led me out of the white room and into a nearby locker. I was glad that it was so close. I didn't want a gang of clones to catch me running around wearing nothing but a grin and a hostage. I had to get one of their uniforms. That's the only way I could blend in with them long enough to escape. The man tried to shove me back with an elbow to my gut. The shock of it sent me reeling, but I made sure to drag the scalpel across his throat as I staggered. I saw him reaching into his pocket, and I forced him up against the wall, pinning his arms as he bled out. It was strange. Ordinarily, people are supposed to feel sadness or horror when they kill someone. Watching this man die, all I felt was clarity and satisfaction. By killing him, I had proved that I was truly alive. It was a simple matter to rinse off the blood in a nearby shower and put on the uniform of the nurses. Before I left, I searched the man's body. I found a gun with 6 bullets and a keychain with an ID card, along with a picture of the poor man's family. Keeping the gun and card, I dropped the picture in the pooling blood around his body. I slinked out of the locker room and into the hallways, imitating the cold, expressionless stride of the nurses that tortured me for so long. I passed 5 of them on different occasions trying to find my way around, but none of them impeded me. I reached what could only be an administration desk. This had to be the exit. Suddenly an alarm blared, and the door behind me locked. The other 2 clones looked at each other, then at me. I stared back at them for 10 seconds, then broke character and drew my gun. It took 3 bullets to kill them, as one dodged my first shot at her. However, it wasn't much trouble. A quick scan of the dead man's ID and I was on my way. Stealing his car was a simple matter. I couldn't believe it. I was free. I could run wild all night long. Of course, they would try to catch me, but I could give them a nice chase. Maybe I'd even get away. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. How long had it been since I had eaten? I needed nutrition, or I wouldn't be going anywhere. If memory served me right, there was a nearby grocery store. I didn't have any money on me, but I wasn't above shoplifting. As I walked into the store, I remembered that it wasn't wise to escape prison and immediately go on a crime spree, but I couldn't shake the thought of food. I needed something, anything to fill my aching belly. A display caught my eye. In the front of the grocery store was a small cafe. Its seats were devoid of customers, and the pungent smell of freshly brewed coffee called to me. I knew I was taking enough of a risk even coming into a store at all, instead of hiding in the woods and eating bugs or something. But some part of my mind refused to live a new kind of self-imposed torture and degradation after everything I had been through. I made a plan. Chat up the barista, get my coffee, then run with it instead of paying. I couldn't be here long and I didn't have any money on me, so I'd have to leave quickly and steal whatever I actually got here. The barista showed his face, and I was so focused on stealing a little treat for myself that, well, I didn't see my absolute fate approaching until it was already too late. I felt a small metal cylinder poke into the center of my back, unmistakably the barrel of a gun. I didn't move or react, knowing that anything sudden would cause me to lose my spinal cord and several internal organs. The barista came back. His face took on a sickly pallor, and he almost dropped the cup he held. "It's you," he said, his voice shaking. "In that case, consider this one on the house." The barista set the piping hot coffee down on the counter in front of me and backed off slowly without breaking eye contact with whoever was behind me until he was out of sight. It was like watching him retreat from a cougar, only that I knew whatever nightmarish hunter he was so terrified of wouldn't give me the luxury of a chase. The best I could hope for now is a quick death. "Did it hurt when you fell from heaven? Because you look sexy as hell to me." I almost collapsed. The voice of a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, rang out from behind me. Why would she introduce herself with a bad pickup line? Was she really that confident that I couldn't put up even the slightest bit of resistance? The same woman caused an innocent barista to flee in terror, and she seemed to have a peculiar form of attraction to me. I tried not to think of the implications of such treatment, and failed miserably. "Pick up that coffee." The command came from right next to my ear, and it was spoken loud and clear. I started to reach one hand up, then felt the gun press deeper into my back. "Use both hands," the voice stated. I let out a whimper of fear, then reached both arms toward the cup at the same speed. My hands were shaking something fierce, but I kept them moving slowly toward the cup. The counter was a few feet away, but I couldn't move my legs. Terror had frozen them to the spot. So I gradually leaned closer to the counter until my wrists leaning on it were all that held me up. With an almost victorious push, I reached out and grabbed the cup with both hands. "Very good. I'll be gentle then." Before I could question anything, I felt my butt explode in a flash of pain. A scream caught in my throat. Whether it was from the tension I had been holding on to for the past 3 minutes, or the pain and shock of being hit, I couldn't know. Her hand came down upon me again and again, but I forced myself to take it silently. That gun was still dug into my back, and I knew I'd face much worse if I made even the slightest move or reaction. It felt like forever that I was stretched out across this counter, letting this vile woman have her fun. Eventually, though, the hits slowed, and after what was likely an hour, they stopped altogether. I still felt a hand on me, and a gun pressed into my back, so I did nothing but silently clutch the coffee cup and hope that, whoever this was, she wouldn't drag me back to the facility. Under no circumstances could I allow that to happen. "You're being so good for me, darling. Do exactly what I order you to, and I might give you a chance." Both points of contact with the woman vanished. I slowly turned around to look upon the source of my troubles. What I saw only increased my feeling of unease, as it was so strange that I could barely comprehend what was happening. A tiny woman in a white pantsuit sat with her legs crossed in one of the chairs. Her platinum blonde hair was cut in a short bob, and her mouth was wide open in a toothy grin. Her teeth must have been bleached or something. They were so white that I couldn't look directly at them without the reflection hurting my eyes. There was such an overwhelming aura of confidence from her that I felt something very much like resignation looking at her. Whatever she wanted, she would get. She wasn't alone either. Tied to her chair by chain Lisi. Tied in 3, 2, 1. Tied to her chair by chain Lisi. Screw me. Again. 3, 2, 1. Tied to her chair by chain leashes were 3 swimsuit-clad women. One wore a leotard, another wore a bikini, one wore only a thong. The one thing they all wore was my face. The hunter opened her mouth. "Sit," she ordered quietly. I looked at the chair across the table from her. It was a small metal thing, and unlike every other chair in the cafe, it had no cushion. Underneath the hunter I saw 2 cushions. The sheer pettiness of this hoe astounded me to no end. I sat down, wincing as I did so. I tried not to show it, but I was squirming in that chair. She hit me hard, and even the act of sitting was almost unbearable now. I almost instinctively reached behind to massage myself, but her grin widened as I did, and her hand patted the side of her belly. That must be where she keeps her gun. My body was on fire, but I forced my hands calmly back into my lap. The hunter's smile vanished. I wouldn't be giving her a reason to shoot me just yet. She cleared her throat. "You may call me Topfoddy. That's not the name my parents gave me at birth, but it's something of an honorable title which my colleagues call me, and I do love my work more than life itself." Topfoddy was a chatty one, apparently. I knew enough word games from certain abusive cousins trying to pretend they were smarter than me, so I could engage this freak on her own terms and keep her distracted for a while. I just hoped I could think of a plan to escape her in that time. "You certainly put a lot of enthusiasm into meeting me. You've made such an impression that I can still feel just how much you've touched my heart," I said, engaging with the joke in an attempt to show that I wasn't afraid. She saw right through me. "Oh, darling, I don't think you're squirming just from the pain. If you bend over at this table and beg me enough, I'd be willing to continue until you can't even think at all." The thought of being smacked even one more time made my head spin. "Don't worry, I'm only joking. Can you blame me, though? It's your fault. You deserved it for walking around looking that pretty. I mean, how am I supposed to talk with you when the very sight of you makes me feel so delightfully cold and slimy inside. I saw an opportunity and took the lead, which seemed to catch her by surprise. You're a truly vile person, Top Foddy. You've spent so much time indulging yourself that you haven't even told me why you're here. Such a filthy degenerate. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. My outburst was more bravado than actual courage, but it did the trick. Top Foddy screamed and leaned back, looking away from me. I heard sobbing noises as she turned back around, but her eyes were noticeably dry. Such a blatant show of falsehood offended me to no end. Within the blink of an eye, I had blurted out a string of words that hit her harder than any slap. Quit wasting my time! You're not even trying hard enough for me to call those fake tears. Honestly, it's like you respect me even less than those bimbos you got chained up. She had done a good job of scaring me at first, chilled me to the bone, made me feel like I was nothing but a fox for her to hunt. Now I could see past the blinding grin and overbearing confidence. She was nothing but scum, a manipulative parasite who grins and thrives on her effect on others. If I could defeat her psychologically, I could render her weak enough to break away. I desperately hoped that I would be strong-willed enough to do so. However, I felt a strong knot of dread form in my stomach as I watched her unnerving smile reform. Oh, not bad, sweetheart. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. You're absolutely right. I brought these 3 fine ladies here to show you a good role model. You should be more like them. At this, the one wearing a thong leaned down and kissed Top Foddy on the lips. It took all I had to not throw up. The freak resumed her insane ramblings. Since you're so clever, would you mind answering a question for me? There's something that's been gnawing at my mind for a while. My dear girl, what do you think of judicial punishment? Surely a criminal would have to be dealt with harshly in order to prevent them from becoming a repeat offender, right? And once again she had driven me back. I sensed an intense malice emanating from her. The real battle, it seemed, was only beginning. I prepared my counterattack. I will say, a judicial system that follows its own rules and gives every man a fair shake could keep some semblance of law and order, but the idea of punishment is dangerous. Hammurabi's code, the eye for an eye philosophy, tends to be prevalent even now. It's a disgusting process that serves as an excuse for supposedly righteous people to inflict great amounts of pain on supposed criminals. And since that philosophy goes hand in hand with vigilantism, it could often lead to the suffering of an innocent person. If an innocent man is wrongly accused of stealing, and his hand is cut off for it, it would be harder for him to find honest work and likely lead to him actually stealing. In that case, it would be better not to punish the criminal at all. I had hoped that string of words might catch her off guard. It was a lot of hot air, but I hoped it would make her think some before responding. Her comeback was nearly instant. The hypothetical I pose doesn't involve any uncertainty. The criminal is guilty and everyone knows it. An eye for an eye. An interesting thought, but what happens if the criminal destroys many eyes? That would mean they'd have to experience the pain of having their own eye destroyed more times than physically possible. A mass murderer would need to redo from a mass murderer in 3, 2, 1. A mass murderer would need to feel the pain of several executions, one for every life they claimed. What happens if they commit genocide, on a scale so immense that only a handful of people are left alive on the entire world? Such a horrific person would need to suffer for all eternity. Anything less, and justice simply could not be served. Wouldn't you agree that such a horrible crime deserves the most absolute punishment that could be delivered? She wasn't even taking me seriously at this point. The worst part was, she made sense. If I had the chance to eliminate any of the infamous dictators that came to mind when I heard the term genocide, I would likely condemn them to the same fate without a second thought. The woman must have seen that I was coming to terms with their methods. I believe we can cut to the chase. No matter how pretty your face or how voluptuous your body may be, whatever punishment I give you simply won't be enough for you to pay the debt you owe. You, with that pretty face and perfect body, gunned down my entire family right in front of me. I only survived because I was small enough to fit inside a ventilation shaft. My brother and parents, though, weren't so lucky. Oh, the atrocities you committed upon my mother were nothing short of beautiful. None of them had swift deaths, but I found true beauty in what... Redo from none of them had swift deaths, because screw me. In 3, 2, 1. None of them had swift deaths, but I found true beauty in watching what was once a woman be reduced to a sobbing mess, and then an unrecognizable pile of meat. You wouldn't remember that, though. I must say, seeing you broken and humiliated, at my mercy and letting me do whatever I want to your precious body without even a whimper of protest, it does things to me. I'm completely and utterly satisfied. I've claimed my pound of flesh. I opened my mouth, but she reached over and pushed it shut with a strong hand. I bit my tongue and felt a flash of pain, but said nothing. As she held my face, she looked straight into my eyes with a gleeful smile on her face. I am only one person, she continued, her smile growing wider as she talked until it reached an unsettling width. You've repaid your debt for one person that you hurt. The world's population was 8 billion when you took power. By the time you were overthrown, we had 500 individuals, and so many clones of you that we could barely handle them. They quickly became subservient to us, as our unique genetic material was much more valuable than another perfect copy of yours. Still, for all the benefits their free labor gave those who were left, we never were free of the ghosts. How many stories just like mine did you write, babe? I saw you in action, but even I couldn't count the mass graves or slave camps with any semblance of accuracy. I suppose you'll just have to take so much pain that we can be certain you've repaid the entire world. As I listened to her talk, despair gripped my heart tighter with each word. The woman never slowed or faltered. Her smile showed only the pure honesty of long-awaited revenge. Needless to say, I fully believed her story. I did everything she said and then some. I had no memory of it, but I had no doubt of it either. She leaned back in her chair and eyed me up. I see you're feeling pensive. I don't want this getting too complicated, so I'll give you a simple choice. You can do the right thing for once in your life and turn yourself in. You'll receive the punishment you deserve. After that, you can either walk away from all of it a free woman, or kill yourself. Either choice is understandable after such an ordeal, but you will be given that choice out of fairness. Or you can simply get up and try to run away. Prove us right that you're still the same murderer that burned our world to the ground, and face our full fury and response. Just know that if I have to chase you down, I won't be gentle. I've got plenty of fun little toys back home, and I don't have to return you to the punishment ward in one piece. Whips and chains are fun to use on these three, but I've got an especially rusty hammer set aside just for you. Ah! I thought for a moment, then responded with a shaking voice. Well, I'll do it. I'll submit. The woman leaned in close, stroking my cheek. Are you certain? Once you've committed to this, there's no going back. I immediately felt a sense of overwhelming fear, and my self-preservation instincts kicked in harder than ever. If I went with this woman back to the compound, I would be submitting myself to a fate worse than death. My mind would cease to exist entirely. No! I screamed, recoiling. I want to live. I want to be a person again, to show that I can be better than the me that you knew. I spluttered, tears in my eyes, but they were met with only a burning sting all over my face. Topfoddy had thrown the steaming cup of coffee right onto me. The choice is yours. Think about it for a little while if you want. Just know that this store has only one exit, and I won't be letting you through it without handcuffs and a collar. Now get up, walk around, help yourself to any of the goods within this store. I'll put it on my tab. I already know that you can't handle living here forever. You're ambitious enough to try and fight your way out of the compound, so the more you think and brood, the more likely you are to get it into your head that you can take me on. I won't lie, I do hope you try to run. I hope you get so insanely cocky that you confront me directly, because even though I've punished you enough to make up for everything you did to me, I'll never pass up a chance to break that troublesome spirit of yours. There are only so many ways that I can explore all those delightful curves on your body. But the day that I've broken your mind and rendered you as thoughtless as these three mindless slaves will be, the day that my life is complete. With that, she grabbed me by the shoulder and pushed me out of the chair. I didn't know if it was shock, fear, or ambition that drove me, but I quickly scuttled away. Looking back, I saw Topfoddy place a hand on her chest and let out the most wicked laugh I had ever heard. Her smile was nothing short of grotesque, a mockery of all that I knew of human happiness. My view of her quickly faded, replaced by cans of beans, soup, and assorted vegetables. I collapsed headfirst onto the ground, laying on my belly. It took all I had to run from that nightmarish freak of nature. How could I be sure of anything? Reality itself seemed so far away from me. Was I a simple fighter or a monstrous tyrant? Was I even someone who deserved to exist? No, one thing was certain. There was no point in clinging to vengeance. These people stopped me from becoming the monster that they had feared so much, but they had done so by depriving me of even the dignity that comes with a natural death. They had wasted so much time, so many resources on driving me to the edge of insanity, when they could have simply put an end to both. Redo from they wasted in 3, 2, 1. They had wasted so much time, so much resources on driving me to the edge of insanity, when they could have simply put an end to both me and any fears they had of me. Screw that. I hate that line. Redo from these people, because screw me times 2. 3, 2, 1. These people stopped me from becoming the monster that they feared so much, but they had done so by depriving me of even the dignity that comes with a natural death. They had wasted so much time, so many resources, on driving me to the edge of insanity, when they could have simply put an end to both me and any fears they had of me. I would do one of two things. I would escape, or I would die. Only liberty or death would satisfy me now, not that prolonged state of undeath that the torturers kept me in, or whatever torment Topfati would inflict upon me before handing me back to them on a silver platter. I would not allow my soul to be turned white. I stood up slowly, regaining my composure. I looked around, searching for any kind of weapon I might use. Topfati would put a bullet in me if I got close with openly hostile intentions, so I would need a ranged attack, preferably one she couldn't see coming. I still had 3 bullets in my gun, but she'd see a firearm coming a mile away. By the time I'd gotten within range and drawn on her, she'd have already put 3 bullets in me. Cans were good for tossing, but was I honestly going to throw a can at her? That's my plan? Screw that. I needed something better. The minimum required effort to survive would have to involve something better than throwing a can. Maybe a knife? Well, I would have plenty of time to plan my escape. For now, I may as well just find something to eat. What did I like back in the good old days? I thought back, but I couldn't remember any food I liked. An image came to mind, though. A movie where the villain couldn't feel anything and longed to taste an apple again. A show where the most demonic character loves apples. A book about vampires with an apple on the cover. A fairy tale about the consequences of a poisoned apple. Truly, it seemed that the best food for monsters would be a juicy red apple. It was a short walk to the fruit aisle. I saw bananas, pears, and there, on the shelf, there was one last red apple. I picked it up. Almost shamefully, I bit deeply into it. The sound was weird, however. Too thick. I looked around. An unoccupied shopping cart, propelled by some nameless force, rolled to a stop right in front of me. I looked up, but nobody was in the aisle. "You can come out now," I called, my unease growing by the second. 2 of Topfati's slaves came out from the far end of the aisle, walking toward me. I turned around and saw the one wearing a thong come up from behind me. "Good," she said, her voice holding an odd tone. "Those reflexes will serve you well." She walked past me and over to the 2 clones. I noticed that she was holding a can. No, could it be? The thong-wearing clone bashed the can into the leotard clone's head. The victim crumpled under the weight of the blow instantly. The bikini clone tried to retaliate, but the thong clone was already strangling her. Once the bikini clone stopped resisting, thong clone picked the can up and slammed it over and over into bikini clone's throat, crushing her windpipe into powder. All I could do was watch in shock. Not a drop of blood spilled, but thong clone had just erased 2 lives within the span of a minute with ease. She walked over to me, smiling. Her words turned my entire worldview upside down. "So good to have you back, mistress." I stared at the clone, hoping that I hadn't heard her right. I stammered a rudimentary response as I fell to my knees. Do I know you?" The clone deflated, looking at me with a frown. "Mistress, don't you remember me? It's me, Liliana, your honorable right hand. Wait, I suppose you wouldn't know me. Oh, curse those spiteful freaks. It's not our fault that prisoners were meant to wear stripes. I suppose I was a little too enthusiastic with the whip at times. After all, fatality rates among my personal toys were high, but I can't help how much fun I was having. You're bound to know what I mean. You were even more bloodthirsty than I was. Come on, you've still got to have those killer instincts. You can't rule the world without them, after all. You know what I mean? Killer instincts? Yeah, I did know what that clone meant. Sure, I could take a life in order to survive. I had already slain 3 in that regard. But there was still something more. I didn't know if it was just a form of potential I held, or something I had learned while Topfadi's people had me chained up. However, I fully knew that I could kill someone that I truly hated. I would feel nothing but satisfaction to do so. The only thing I was unsure of is if the clone knew the weight of her words. She was living proof of my atrocities, sure, but she clearly was no idle bystander. I began to feel a fire welling up inside me. I wanted nothing more than to turn this demon inside out. Forget me, forget Topfoddy. At least the freak show had a reason to be that spiteful. Liliana was vile to the core, a true pillar of wickedness. Ideas started to form in my head. Liliana wanted her mistress. Why not give that to her? I let out a soft laugh and looked up at Liliana with a wry smirk. You know, Liliana, you may be right. Now take off that swimsuit. The plan we formulated over the next couple minutes was simple, but it would likely be effective. Liliana and I had swapped our outfits. She now had my gun. Liliana would attack and kill Topfoddy while I slipped out and got the car ready. Then she would rejoin me and escape. That's what I told Liliana anyway. What I actually expected was that Liliana would die fighting Topfoddy and buy me enough time to slip away. It was a beautiful plan. The person most deserving of death gets it, and I would get enough time to vanish into the night forever. It didn't take us long to put it into action. Liliana strode down the main aisle with the confidence that only a wicked general or zealous cultist could strut with. Meanwhile, I skulked out from behind, watching the scene play out through my peripheral vision as I closed in on the door. Topfoddy paused for a moment, then began to speak. Darling, that's an absolutely lovely smell. You may have swapped clothes, but that coffee I threw on you was a rare form of dark roast so delicious I could bathe in it. Even if I didn't notice that scar on your belly, did you think I wouldn't smell that black gold on you? With that, she drew an odd-looking gun and shot it once at me. I tried to dodge, but felt a sudden pain in my thigh. All I could do now was run, so run I did. As I got into my car, I heard 3 gunshots ring out. I looked back to see what happened. Liliana was on the ground in a pool of her own blood. Topfoddy twirled a silver revolver before tucking it back into her coat and walking toward me. Out of sheer terror, I floored the gas pedal, accelerating off into the twisted mountain roads. I slowed for all of a minute to check my thigh. It was far worse than I thought. Topfoddy hadn't shot me with a gun, but a tranquilizer dart. I imagined being dragged back to that torture chamber, where I wasn't even able to kick and scream. I would rather die than allow that. Off in the distance, I heard the roar of an engine. There was only one person who'd pursue me, even now. I slammed my gas pedal and took off once again, trying to remember my way through these mountains. If I was right, there was a switchback up ahead. If I hit it with enough speed, the impact from falling should be enough to kill me. If Topfoddy doesn't know about it, or loses herself in pursuit of me, then maybe I can take that old bloodhound with me. Well, speak of the devil. Blinding high beams, springing from a tacky white sports car, came chasing behind me. Just past the light, I could see Topfoddy's grotesque smile, stretching from ear to ear. I tapped my brakes, wondering if she would take the bait. If I could just get her on my left side, I could ensure that she goes over the edge. With a sullen sort of satisfaction, I watched as she pulled right into my trap. She abandoned her focus on the road entirely to stare and yell at me. Well, isn't this nice? I do love that you tried the old switcheroo on me. You led me on quite a chase and helped me smoke out a traitor. Mighty nice of you. Oh, I was right to become so obsessed with you. Your sweet ass is the finest piece of property I've ever owned. You should know, darling, that this isn't a good path we're on. If you stop now and let that drug take effect, you'll live. I looked at Topfati, flashed her a grin of my own, and turned back to the road. Her laughter was nothing short of overpowering. It even invigorated me somewhat. Yes, yes! Topfati crowed, reveling with a base, pure and crude form of victory. I've done it! I've won! I've taken that precious mind of yours and smashed it into tiny little splinters. Oh, baby, my life! Oh, it's complete! Let's go together then, my darling Estella. Oh, such a sweet moment. I've never felt so alive. Our car slammed through a guardrail like it was made of paper. Yes, perhaps I found a victory of my own. These actions were taken with my hands, because I deemed them a worthy course to take. I decided my own fate. I lived. I felt a sharp pain in my forehead.